Hello, fellow rebel capitalist. We are here again with another story.
Oh,
I
I
will
hope
be
you're
leading
well.
this time. Oh, I hope you are well.
There
Yeah.
you go. There you go.
So, for the but the first story, New York City coming out with a state of emergency.
Well,
But
Josh, you
why?
got to tell them what we're doing.
What are we doing?
Well, what we're doing, guys, today is we're just going to go over the news, and we're going to try to do this maybe 2 or 3 times a week at 3 p.m. Eastern time, and then kind of take the main stories and then break them into clips for the day after. A lot like what Tim Pool does. I really like that. So we're going to give it a shot. And so Josh is going to be joining me on the news. Sometimes we'll have guests in as well, like we had Art Berman yesterday. So, yeah, that said, let's get into the news. And the first story that Josh pulled up was from Zero Hedge. And it looks like the New York City mayor declares a state of emergency after migrants overwhelm resources. So the whole gist here is, oh, you got it highlighted, Josh?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So you want to go over your highlights?
Yeah. So, I mean, basically, Texas just started saying, okay, if you're going to make us take all the immigrants, we'll take them, but we're going to have nonstop buses running from Washington, D.C. and New York. So, right now, as we can see here on Friday, Eric Adams, who's the mayor of New York City, says since April, at least 17,000 seekers have been bushed to New York City from other
Bust.
parts of the country.
Bust.
Bust. He said the city received an average of 5 to 6 buses per day since September, with at least 9 arriving on Thursday. So just
Wow.
thousands of
Nine,
thousands.
nine buses in one day.
Yeah,
Oh, jeez.
just
And
thousands.
you know what's funny too is I read a story on this, not on Zero Hedge. Obviously, it's going to have a little bit different slant, but I read about it on probably CNBC or something like that. And I was interested to see how like the liberal media would spin this. And the way they kind of spun it is, oh, these migrants are great. We want them here. But the reason why he has to declare it's an emergency is because all those stupid people in Texas sent them over here and they didn't even know they were coming to New York.
Yeah.
They said, well, how can you ship all these people here? And they got off the bus and they didn't even know they were coming to New York. Oh, okay. I'm not sure how that makes a difference. And then they said, and plus, these people aren't even legal to work in the United States.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, is that kind of Texas's point? But anyway, oh yeah, here you go.
The majority are adults who cannot legally work in this country. Many are families with school-aged children. Some are in desperate need of serious medical care, Adam continued. We are going to do what we have to do in New York, but we do need to help to deal with the crisis that we are facing.
Yeah. So again, if he's admitting that it's a crisis, then why do we want the crisis, the burden of the crisis, to be on the shoulders of just one state? And now maybe these people can see why it might not be a good idea. I think Milton Friedman got this right, because this is a difficult problem. It's, again, not like there are any solutions, there are only alternatives. But Friedman always said, listen, let's just have open borders, or to a certain degree, or more open borders, just like I don't know that the liberals back then wanted that, but obviously the liberals today do. But if you want more open borders, that's fine, but you've got to do away with welfare. So you have to get rid of welfare. You have to get rid of all the handouts. You've basically got to get rid of anything that would incentivize someone to come here that wasn't willing to work or didn't have that type of skill set. And you can imagine what that would do. Just think about that for a moment. If the United States had no safety net whatsoever, none, zero, what type of people would want to immigrate here?
Yeah.
Maybe a lot of the same group. Sure. But would you have a lot of people that were coming here with no job skills and 5 kids? Probably not. And you'd have, I mean, you know what's staggering about when you go back and read the history of the United States is the people that came over initially. I mean, there was literally a 50% chance, if not more, that you would die just on the trip over, let alone the first year. So when you think about what type of mindset and what type of toughness you have to have in order to take that type of risk in the first place, and to think that the first, I don't know, let's say 100 years of the country, you bring in these types of people. Well, that culture is going to continue to resonate through multiple generations. So is it any surprise that the US, because of that type of culture, along with having the Constitution and whatnot, and I dare to say rule of law, because back then there was pretty much no rule of law at all. But with these other contributing factors, is it any surprise that we became a great success when you look at the process to get here in the first place? Right? It's a selection bias, I think, is what they would say in economics. But
Yeah, yeah.
anyway, I don't want to get too
I
far.
think, the talking heads today were Milton Friedman probably didn't think about because it was far too intellectual for him, is we just need to give the hotels all the free rooms to all the immigrants and the homeless, and then there's really nothing to worry about.
Of course. I mean, that solves everything. I mean,
Yeah.
we just need an app for that, just like Uber or something, where
Yeah.
as soon as you come across the border, all you do is download the app, and then you go to whatever city you want, and then the app tells you which hotels have vacancy that
Yeah.
night,
Oh, that's a great
and
idea.
then you just go to whatever hotel you want, and we just give it to all the people that are crossing the border, and we give it to all the homeless people, and then problem solved.
Yeah, yeah.
What
They'll
you
be free.
stupid libertarians and free market capitalists don't get, Josh, is that we've got plenty of housing stock. We've got plenty of roofs to house all the people that are coming here and all the people that are homeless. We're just too callous. We just don't care about poor. In fact, we hate poor people. We hate poor people. We hate immigrants. And this is why we aren't allowing them to occupy all of the vacant hotel rooms that we have across the United States. Well, and then hotel room, why not Airbnbs as
Yeah.
well? I
Why
mean,
wouldn't you just let them in your house? Because, I mean,
that's
that's
my
evil
point.
not to.
That's my point.
Yeah.
If you got an Airbnb, let's say you rent out a room in your house, and obviously you're going to have some nights where you don't have any occupancy. Why on earth would you not want to have a homeless drug addict come on in? I'm sure you've got 2 or 3 kids, a dog, a pool in the back where they could clean up a little bit. I mean, that's just that's perfect scenario. The only reason we're not coming to those conclusions, or only reason we're not implementing those solutions, is just because we hate homeless people.
Yeah.
Obviously, guys, we're being sarcastic there, but we're just being sarcastic to show the insanity of what is being proposed now by the central planners and authoritarians in a lot of these states like California.
You know who does not hate homeless people and is actively fighting it with her billions of dollars? Uh,
Ah,
Miss Melinda Gates.
yes, yes, yes. Oh, no, not Melinda Gates, Josh.
Oh, yeah, Melinda French Gates.
There you go. Let's get it
Yeah.
right. Let's get it right. So the first thing that you have to ask about this story, and just the title here, billionaire Melinda French Gates, more gender, not equality. I've noticed they're changing the word. You know, they always used to say equality, which they do throughout the rest of this article. But I've noticed now they're kind of, you know, the progressives and whatnot, they love to change the language for reasons that I don't really understand. But now they're moving towards equity, so more gender equity. I don't know how that's different than equality, but according to CNBC, it is in these 4 sectors, and this will change all of society. And what's interesting is they don't say that it'll change for the better; it'll just change. So I don't know that I don't know that that's our goal, Josh. Is our goal as a society just constant change, I think you better be careful what you wish for, because I think we were talking about this with Art yesterday, and Thomas Sowell does a great job of pointing this out. But if you were to assume that humans have evolved over a long period of time, it is also safe to assume that they've evolved in a way that has allowed the species to continue to thrive. We're not extinct like the dinosaurs. And some of the institutions that we have set up allow us to thrive, again, through that selection process. So, an example that I'll give here, and I think it's kind of interesting, is from someone who is a well-known atheist, and this is Brett Weinstein. And Brett Weinstein's fantastic. He got great podcasts. I can't recommend it enough. And he does it with his wife. His wife's name is Heather. And he points out that one of the benefits of religion, especially Christianity, is that the principles, let's just say the Ten Commandments, if you were to follow these principles, that you would have a better chance of making it to a greater age. So, just the 10 Commandments, we could think that right off the top of our head. If you implement these rules, let's say, into your life, you'll probably have, let's say your life expectancy back then would be 40 years. When if you didn't, your life expectancy would be maybe 15 years or something like that. A little rough times back in the biblical times. So what he did is he said, okay, so the people that believed in this, they naturally had a life expectancy. They had more kids, and therefore these ideas resonated and spread throughout a greater percentage of the population. So even like Brett, even if you don't believe in a higher power or a God, or even if you're not a Christian, he says you can see the benefits from a biological, from an evolutionary standpoint from Christianity. And so my point there is, going back to the selection process, but let's just stop there. And then, because I know I'm going off way off on a tangent here. So, okay, Josh,
Yes,
let's
well,
stick to
these 4 sectors will change all of society. I don't know what they are, but I'm sure they must be oil rig workers, some Alaskan fishermen, and,
yeah.
the military. That's
Yeah,
all I could really
my
assume.
point with that massive tangent was just to point out that a lot of times we have evolved to the way we are in society, and the way we have evolved is beneficial. So if we try to break down the way a society is, a lot of times that will make things worse, not better. So do you have stuff highlighted on this article?
Yeah. So, Melinda French Gates has
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a moment, though. So why is because when she was married to Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, she was just Melinda Gates. But now all of a sudden she's Melinda French Gates. So I don't know why. I don't know Melinda well, but I would assume that she's trying to distance herself as much as possible
Yeah.
from Bill. But she can't drop Gates altogether, because then no one knows who the hell she is. And then she loses a lot of credibility. So in an attempt to distance herself from Bill, while at the same time not losing that credibility, she has to throw in French Gates, Melinda French Gates. So go ahead and continue. I just wanted to point that out because I think that is relevant, especially when you go further down the article here.
Yeah, so Melinda French Gates has been an outspoken public advocate of gender equality for decades. And now, the billionaire philanthropist is dedicating her time, wealth, and resources to changing 4 major sectors she believes are at the heart for fighting equality.
Yeah, and like Josh said, it always is interesting to me that these Melinda French Gates types uh, always want to fight for equality in things like being a CEO, or being in politics, or being in the media. But they never want to fight for a 50% distribution in ditch diggers or dangerous jobs like being on an Alaskan fishing boat or garbage collectors. It's interesting that they only want a 50-50 distribution in certain things where they themselves would like to participate.
Yeah.
and you start to see that, whoa, wait a minute here. This isn't necessarily that they're trying to help society. It's really they're trying to project their views on society. That's, I think, really is at the heart of what is going on here. So let's keep going here, Josh.
Yeah, so in 2019, French Gates announced that she would be committing 1 billion of her own money to pivotal ventures. I don't know
Okay, let's
what
stop right there.
yeah, what company has Miss Melinda Gates not only started but made incredible advances in life itself with?
Yeah, or let's just look at it through the lens of goods and services, right? Uh, Now, if she's a billionaire, you would assume that she has produced far, 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 far more, in fact, billions of dollars more than she has consumed. But as we know, Melinda French Gates has not produced billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars worth of value. She simply married and then divorced Bill Gates. And now somehow that is why we should listen to what she says, or she should have this type of credibility. And one thing I went over with Josh earlier, and I think, this is just kind of me thinking out loud. I haven't really studied any research on this, but one thing I find interesting is all of these people that inherit millions of dollars or billions of dollars, they all seem to be very liberal and very progressive from a standpoint of they all seem to be do-gooders. You know, we want to help the poor, we want to give money, we want to tax the rich, we want to do this, we want to do that. And to me, it seems as though, and because I know I would feel this way, that if I inherited $1 billion, yeah, that might be fun for the first 6 months or year or whatever. But I would really feel guilty about that. I mean, why do I deserve this purchasing power? Why do I deserve to be so rich just because of my last name? Or why do I deserve to be this rich or so much better than everyone else? Why do I deserve to rub elbows with the president of France, which is what we'll see in this article, when all I did is just marry someone, or when all I did was just happen to be, with no fault of my own, just born into the right family? So you can see that it would make sense to me that they would have this type of guilt, and therefore an expression of that guilt, or in an effort to try to get that guilt off their chest, they try to do things that make them feel good, even if they are counterproductive to society, or in this case, make absolutely no sense whatsoever. Because what you'll see later on down the article is her argument is that we should just have a 50-50 split with women and men in everything. And that would just change society radically for the better. Well, let's think this through here. I don't know that anyone with an ounce of common sense would say that women and men are identical. That's pretty obvious when you look at them, for one thing, right? But it's just so obvious to me that women and men have different interests. They just do. Now, not all men have different interests than women, and not all women have different interests in men, but you've got 70% of them, let's say. And this is one of the reasons why we have survived as a species. Listen, think about this for a moment. If women were had the exact same mindset as men, there's no way we would survive. There's no, seriously, because you think guys are going to have a kid and they're going to be like, yeah, okay, kind of. And I get it. Some guys are great at raising kids. I get it. But if all we had in society were guys, there's no way the kids we'd have an extremely high death rate with kids, or the death rate would be a lot higher. And then, so now today, that might not be as big of a problem. But when you're dealing back before we had modern medicine, and when we're fighting famine and plague every 20 years, that would have wiped out, we would have been extinct. And it's the same thing with women. If humanity was all women and somehow they could create kids between each other, again, you wouldn't have the benefit of what guys do really, really well as a whole. Not all of them, but as a whole. And you'd have the same result. We'd be completely extinct. And everybody knows this. A 3-year-old knows that women are different than men. But for some reason, Melinda French Gates comes out and says that the world would just be a much, much better place if there was just a 50-50 distribution between men and women in everything, even though when men and women are not equal at all, are not the same. And I would add that I would guess that the Melinda Gates, French Gates types are trans activists, right? Which is a paradox, because I don't want to go too far off on a tangent, but Josh, I'm sure you've thought about this. How is it possible that men and women are equal, identical in every single way, but yet we need to support 4-year-olds who want to transition from being a dude into a chick? Well, what do you mean? Why are we supporting trans people when men and women are identical? And if we really need to support kids transitioning, well, then you're admitting that women and men are not identical. Which do you choose? Because you can't have both, right? It's just, there's just absolutely no intellectual honesty.
Yeah.
And when there's no intellectual honesty, for me, this makes, I distrust them even more. And it's just a glaring red flag that there's some ulterior motive here. That sure, what they're saying, it sounds great, that we want, women to be equal and blah, blah. We want women to have equal opportunity. Absolutely. And Josh, what are the 4 categories or 4 industries that she talks about here? Tech, finance, media, and politics, right? Yeah. So let's think about this. Do women not have equal opportunity in media, for heaven's sakes? In politics? Finance? Maybe. I guess I don't really believe that, but I guess there could be an argument there. I think that's more of a meritocracy, especially if you think all these people in finance are just extremely greedy. Well, if they're that greedy, they're going to hire whomever can make them the most money, whether they're wearing a skirt or slacks. Who cares, right? And then as far as tech, this is utter nonsense when we know that all the tech companies are stumbling over themselves to hire as many women as possible for nothing less than to just strictly virtue signal. But they're setting quotas for themselves and all these things. They're doing everything they can to encourage women to apply for these jobs. So then you have to ask yourself, well, why are they not applying for the jobs? Well, maybe it's because they have different interests. Just maybe. And another thing that I'd like to point out here before moving on is you hear this all the time from the Melinda French Gates types, that women need to be in these positions of power or whatever. They need to be in all the things that she wants to be, not the ditch diggers and the other things, because they are powerful. We are women. We are powerful women. We are bosses. We can do it all if we want to. What's fascinating is if women like Melinda French Gates are so powerful, if they're so amazing, if they're so incredible, if their skill sets are just so overwhelming, why do they need all this help? Josh, do you have an answer for that? If women like Melinda Gates are so unbelievably talented and they're just amazing at everything they do, well, then why on earth do they need our help at everything, according to Melinda French Gates? Do you have an answer for that?
because men are the oppressors, and specifically white men.
But if women are
Yeah,
so
yeah.
amazing, can't they overcome that?
Yeah,
I don't
that makes
know.
no sense.
I think it's a fair question. And listen, I'm not saying that women don't get the short end of the stick in certain things, but listen, men get the short end of the stick in certain things, and it's life, for heaven's sakes. And I think that, did we have some problems and whatnot back prior to the 70s and before the first or second feminist movement? Sure, we probably did. But it doesn't mean that the pendulum, okay, the pendulum's over to the left. We want the pendulum in the middle. We don't want the pendulum way, way over to the right. And in my opinion, that's what they're doing right now, because there's always going to be unfairness. This is the world we live in. It's never going to be perfect, but there's going to be unfairness to men, and there's going to be unfairness to women. It just might show up in different areas. We can't have just a total equal society in every single level without turning into a totalitarian state, without taking the rights away from the majority.
Yeah, my generation was kind of the first to be developed into everything is the same category. I remember as a kid, we'd have art competitions where our parents would come in and see. We'd put the art up all on the wall, and everyone would get the exact same trophy. And the teachers would come in with all the parents later that day, and everyone would kind of look through all of the art. And I am probably the single worst artist this uh, world has ever seen in history. I mean, it is impressive the stick figures I can barely draw.
Well, I believe
And
you.
yeah. So, with that in mind, I remember vividly as a kid, probably first, second grade, there was this girl who, I mean, she was drawing like Picasso's next to me,
Right.
and they put my painting right next to hers. And when the parents are walking around, I remember me and my mom are laughing, saying, because we got the exact same trophy, the participation award.
Right.
Me, who drew a stick figure, and then the Mona Lisa next to me got the exact same trophy. And I asked my art teacher at the time, like, hey, like, how is this possibly fair? I mean, just look at the work. I mean, you can clearly see the difference. And the teacher at the time, she was just like, well, you guys both tried your best, and that's all that matters in life. And that kind of stuck with me for a long time, because I, even at a young age, I couldn't articulate it, but I knew that me and this girl did not deserve the same grade for this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a great point. That's a great point. And yeah, I don't know. She's saying that it'll change society if we have a 50-50 distribution in all these roles. Maybe it will. And maybe we'll have even more participation trophies. Maybe, we'll just eliminate winning and losing altogether. And that'll be a change to society. But I don't know that that would be a change for the better. And I'm guessing that the majority of the people on this live stream, Rebel Capitalists, would would share my opinion there. And again, I'm not saying that women shouldn't be 50-50 in certain industries if that's what they choose to do, and if they're hired based on merit. I think that's great. And if you have some industries where women are 80% because they're just better at that, fantastic, fantastic. But I just saw in the chat, and I don't know who said it here. I apologize. I should have written down their name, but it was a gal that had a job and was making her own money, and she said that she was hired on merit, and she was very proud of that. And I think that's fantastic. But how would you feel if you were a woman and you knew the only reason you were hired was just because of some sort of push, some sort of political narrative, or some sort of law that was put into place? Again, if I was a guy, or if I was a woman, or no matter who I was, it wouldn't matter. If I knew that I wasn't hired based on my skills, if I was hired for some other reason, like nepotism, as an example, or if I was hired because of quote unquote equality or equity, or just because Google was trying to virtue signal, I would not feel right about that. That takes away a sense of purpose and a sense of achievement. And I think at the end of the day, for men and women, that matters. That matters a lot.
Hmm.
Anyway,
Yeah, so why is it so important that we have a 50-50 majority in the all the political aspects of life?
according
Uh,
to French Gates.
yeah, to French Melinda Gates. She acknowledged a new sense of urgency to get more women in politics in the wake of the Supreme Court decision in June to overturn Roe versus Wade, removing nearly 50 years of federal protection for abortions. Before you jump in there, George, let me read the last quote. We have to get more funding for female politicians at all levels. And we have to look back at the barriers that'll keep them from getting there, she told Fortune. Until we get women representatives in all seats of power, you're not going to have representations of society on the Supreme Court. Because if you look at how Americans actually feel about Roe versus Wade, no matter which side of the aisle they're on, what was done doesn't represent what people believe.
So when I first saw this, the first thing that came to my mind was the level of arrogance required to make this statement. As though you, Melinda French Gates, knows definitively that this decision didn't represent what quote unquote people want. Are you serious? So there's no people, there's no percentage of American people that actually thought this was a good decision from the standpoint of giving this power back to the states where, quite frankly, I think it should be. And another thing she's implying with this statement, which I think is misogynistic, or I think it's well, I'll keep going here and I'll think of the right word, but it's sexist. That's the word I was referring to, because she's assuming I think she's implying that all women are pro-choice. Therefore, all women are just completely distraught over the Supreme Court decision recently versus Roe versus Wade. And so, again, how can you say that all women are pro-choice, or how can you even imply that? And here again, whenever I see these, we'll call them central planners, whenever I see them say things that are blatantly false, like this last sentence here, no matter which side of the aisle they're on. So she's saying no matter whether they're Democrat or whether they're Republican, the Supreme Court decision is not what they believe in. This is obviously false. It's a third grader could say, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. And it's just like that UK military guy saying that that the sabotage Russia did by blowing up their own pipeline is an act of aggression against NATO. What? Blowing up their own pipeline is an act of aggression against NATO? How do you connect those dots? The bottom line is you can't. That doesn't make any sense. So when people say something that obviously isn't true, and they state it emphatically, definitively, and they're stating it to push some sort of agenda or some sort of narrative, in my opinion, you immediately know that this person is using propaganda, that they're using deceit in order to accomplish some sort of ulterior motive. And let's look at this last paragraph through that lens. Josh, we've got 1,000 people basically on the live stream right now. And I would argue probably every single one of them knows that Bill Gates, not Bill French Gates, but actually Bill Gates is very vocal about reducing population growth. Some would argue reducing population, period. but at the very minimum, population growth. Or okay, let's just give you the benefit of the doubt. Okay, well, let's go back to this last paragraph, Josh. And let's see. Actually, maybe. I'm sorry. It's a paragraph. It's a higher paragraph. Oh, okay. Maybe it's that second one. Let's read that second one more time here. I'm sorry, bouncing all over. So let me read this. She also acknowledged a new sense of urgency to get more women in politics in the wake of the Supreme Court decision in June to overturn Roe versus Wade, removing nearly 50 years of federal protection for abortion. So what is she arguing for? She's arguing for the United States to have more abortions. Essentially, that, sure, it's women's rights or blah, 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 blah. But listen, this, I think, is most likely a Trojan horse. Just like climate change is a Trojan horse for Klaus and for Ursula, the Davos types. They don't care about climate change. No. This is just a way for them. This is a politically correct way for them to present their objectives to the public in a way that's digestible, in a way that's palatable, right? Because if they just came right out and said, hey, you know what? We want black women to kill more of their kids. That probably wouldn't go over too well in the media, right? But if they come out and say, oh, well, we're all in favor of women's rights, when they know that what that really leads to is more poor people in society, maybe black women, maybe Hispanics, maybe white women, but that are in that income demographic, having fewer kids, i.e. killing more babies. You see, that helps them achieve their overall objective, which is just reducing population growth. This, to me, and I'm not saying that this is what she's pushing, but it makes a hell of a lot more sense to me, knowing that this is blatantly what Bill Gates is pushing, and knowing that by pushing more and more and more and more abortions, that the net result of this is going to be not just a decrease in population growth, but decrease in population growth with the poor demographic, regardless of their race, right? The reason I brought up blacks initially is because if you go back to the live stream we just did on with Kanye West, he pointed out, and I don't know if this is true or not.
Yeah, I looked it up.
It is true. He said that 50% of the death with the black community in the United States annually is a result of abortions. That's a powerful statistic. I mean, that's like, wow, holy cow. So I think it's safe to say, here we go, abortion is the #1 killer of African Americans.
I think they have the actual statistics here, but
so you see what I'm saying? If you know this is the net result, but you can't come out and explicitly say this is your objective, the workaround there, the Trojan horse, or the narrative that you push that is palatable, is pro-choice, pro-Roe versus Wade. So again, I hate to say this. I can't get in someone's mind, right? I can't know the true intentions of Klaus or Bill Gates or Melinda. I can only base my assumption on what they say and what their actions are. But if you look at the totality of what Bill has said about this in the past, I don't think it's an outrageous leap to at least consider this as a hypothesis, as far as this being their ulterior motive that they just really don't want to tell you about.
Yeah, that's pretty much it for Miss Melinda. Do you want to check out the markets really quick?
Yeah, let's shoot over to the markets. We got 1,200 people on the live stream right now, guys. Appreciate you hanging out with us here. Big day in markets for sure, because the jobs report came out, and it was a little bit better than expect. Oh, actually, you know what was interesting is the payroll increase was, I think, I don't know if that was lower than expected, but that was trending down. So the jobs growth has been trending down. It's not like we had negative job growth, but the growth was a lot less than we had in August, and the unemployment rate went down. Now, what's interesting about the unemployment rate going down is that all the talking heads come out and say, oh, well, this means that the economy is booming and everything. Not really, because if you look at why it came down, it's pretty much because the labor force participation decreased. And, one thing I'd like to research, maybe I'll include it in a whiteboard video next week, is I'd like to show a chart of labor force participation and the stock market, or maybe the housing market, or maybe combine that, because I'd be willing to bet that there'd be a pretty strong correlation between the labor force participation and asset prices in the United States. In other words, as asset prices go up, the labor force participation goes down. And as asset prices go down, the labor force participation goes up, because people are like, holy cow, I've got to get back to work. And then when the market goes back up, they're like, no, forget it. I'm going to go back and just live off my Dogecoin, my 401k, and my stimmy checks. So I don't know. What do you think about that, Josh?
I just pulled up a chart of labor force participation.
Oh yeah, let's look here. So labor force participation.
If we go 1 year, we can kind of see it's
No,
started.
go 10 years. Okay, so you see it going down and then kind of trending sideways. Yeah, that might. The COVID's tough though, because they're basically, the government forced labor participation to go down. Probably went down a heck of a lot further than that. But yeah, there might be something there. Definitely worth researching even more. But what did this do? So this potentially strong unemployment number made the stock market tank to, is that live, Josh?
Yeah, down
Okay,
almost.
so stock market right now down, the Dow, 673 points, or 2.25%. So what the market's doing is they're saying, holy cow, we got this good jobs number. Therefore, that means that the Fed is most likely going to continue to raise interest rates.
And we can see that with the Fed funds terminal rate.
As far as what they're predicting?
Yeah, shot up the second. Right today, the 7th, it shot up to 4.66.
Yeah. So here's what's going on in the market right now. We go back to last week or the week prior, where the UK blew up, and the Bank of England went from doing quantitative tightening to quantitative easing, and then the market explodes higher in the U.S. because they believe that, oh my gosh, this is a sign that the Fed is going to pivot sooner than later. Because if the BOE did it, well, the Fed is next. But what this is doing is this is basically just pouring cold water on that idea. Now, who knows if it's true or not? I think it all depends on XYZ Black Swan event. But
Yeah, actually,
go ahead.
I don't know if this is, like, to me, this looks like the chart of oil. Just looks like the chart of oil pretty much exactly. We saw oil up 5% today, and the payroll and the Fed funds did the exact same thing. Maybe the market sees that if the price of oil goes up, the Fed's going to have to continue to raise rate to fight off inflation. So,
but I think both could be a derivative of inflation, or
absolutely
expected inflation. Because if we have more expected inflation, then most likely oil goes up. Although that could be a little bit with the production cuts that aren't really cuts that we'll talk about in a moment. But yeah, I think that your point's accurate, that both those are just probably a derivative of inflation expectations.
Yeah, so it seems like, what's the bond market doing right now?
So bonds skyrocket, as you'd expect, because now the market is saying, okay, the Fed's going to be more hawkish, where last week we thought they'd be more dovish based on what happened in the UK. So it's just this massive volatility where the market explodes higher, and then just gets kind of a swift kick in the nuts, as my dad would always say, by a good jobs report. But isn't that pathetic that that's where we are with the
Yeah.
United States economy right now, that the stock market just explodes higher, not as a result of a good jobs number, or I'm sorry, that the market absolutely tanks because we get a good jobs number.
Yeah, that is pathetic.
I mean, it's this whole good news is bad news and bad news is good news for the stock market. Just a complete perversion or the complete inverse of what it actually should be. And it just shows to show you how that what really drives the U.S. economy is the financial economy, and it's not vice versa like it should be. So we'd expect in this environment for gold to go down, Josh. So gold
Yeah, yeah.
down. Yep,
All
yep.
metals down.
And we definitely expect Bitcoin to be down. Yeah,
Yeah,
which it
down
was
3%.
almost 3%. And the reason we'd expect Bitcoin to be down is because the NASDAQ was down so much, because the NASDAQ is what's most sensitive to interest rate increases, because they're all those growth stocks. And as we know, unfortunately, Bitcoin is traded, not lately, but it tends to trade with the NASDAQ, but it would definitely trade as kind of a growth stock or risk on. And so if we're talking about interest rates going higher, that's going to be risk off, which is why it's kind of taking a hit there.
Yeah, I think the last story that you really want to go over was this one on oil. That was just we gotta break the OPEC cartel.
Yeah. And this, I don't know if the guy, Ron Insana, I don't know this guy very well. And I don't know if he would fall into the category of, well, using today's topics, I don't know if he would fall into the category of Kim Kardashian or Melinda French Gates, right? Is Ron Insana just kind of, he doesn't really take the time to do, maybe that's it, because you got to think what it would be like to be one of these reporters for CNBC. I mean, you think about how packed your day would be. I mean, it would just be nonstop, just nonstop, nonstop, nonstop. You're just trying to, relay all this information. You get this story, and then that's on your desk. You probably don't have even time to eat. You probably don't have time to think straight, I would imagine. And then what do you do after 5? You're right there downtown New York. I'm sure you probably got a lot of pull at restaurants. You probably got your schedule packed every single night after work. You're going to dinner with this mayor or with this hedge fund manager or something like that. So it's not like you've got a lot of time Monday through Friday. And then on the weekend, the last thing you're probably wanting to do is just study financial history. So I don't, maybe we give him the benefit of the doubt, and he's just reporting based on having a very limited understanding of how the oil market actually works.
Do most
But
people not study financial history on their
but
weekends?
yeah, but see here, yeah. But again, my argument to Art Berman was that's his job. His
Yeah, yeah.
job is to know this. Even if he's not an expert, his job is to find out, because he's someone that's a supposed authority figure being in the mainstream media on a financial network like CNBC. So anyway, let's go through the talking points here, Josh.
Saudi Arabia's decision to ally with Russia and push through the largest supply cuts by OPEC Plus since 2020 means it's time for the U.S. to take every available step it can to boost U.S. energy production. This week's OPEC opted to cut oil production by some 2 million barrels a day, and oil prices are already climbing.
Okay, so let's stop right there. As we learned yesterday from Art Berman, whenever you hear anyone what they reference what OPEC did as production cuts, you know that they're not serious, or you know that you can't take them seriously, because these aren't production cuts. They're or at least not to the degree to which they are stating. And who knows, this might not even move the needle at all as far as production, Why? If you didn't see the live stream yesterday with Art Berman, because this is bringing down a production quota, And so many of the OPEC countries weren't meeting their quota to begin with. In fact, I heard from Eric Townsend, I heard a couple places, that as a whole, OPEC Plus, prior to making this announcement, was producing 3.5 million barrels a day under their quota. So let's think about this. Let's just assume they reduced their quota by 2 million, which they did. But let's say they're actually able to achieve that quota. They would literally be producing more barrels a day than they're producing right now. And it took me about 5 minutes to figure this out. In the sense that I just follow Eric Townsend on Twitter, which Ron Insana could do, right?
Yeah.
And you know that this guy's an oil expert. This is what he does for a living, trades oil. And so, you'd think that he'd have some insight there that you might want to pay attention to. So again, my point is, if you're listening to CNBC, if you're listening to the mainstream media, and you hear anybody talk about these huge production cuts, you immediately know they don't know what they're talking about. All right, let's keep going, Josh.
Saudi Arabia's decision to ally with Russia and push through the largest supply cut by OPEC since 2020 means it's time for the U.S. to take every available step it can to boost U.S. energy production.
Again, the largest supply cut since 2020. Nonsense. The supply quota cut, not supply cut, but keep going.
This could even mean the nuclear option, a point I mean literally in terms of deploying nuclear power to assist in meeting the nation's energy needs. This is definitely good for all the uranium bulls out there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to give him a golf clap.
Yeah,
because,
yeah.
Okay, good on you, Ron. I definitely agree with that.
The OPEC's cuts were set at some 2 million barrels per day. The decision appears aimed at bolstering oil prices, which have fallen to roughly $80 a barrel from more than 120 in early June. Oil has already climbed back above $92 a barrel despite signs of economic slowing.
Yeah, so here our problem is just assuming that the total increase was a result of the OPEC decision, when we know that oil was trending higher even before OPEC. I believe that before they announced that, oil had already gone from 80 to about 87, and then up to 92. So to think that, in fact, like one of the main reasons it was going from 80 to 87 is because so many of the traders out there, so many people in the marketplace started to understand what Eric Townsend has been saying now for weeks, that, oh, wait a minute here. If OPEC can't even produce what their quotas are, what does this mean for future production? This means that they are running at full capacity and they're not even able to supply the world with what it needs as far as demand. And a lot of people would argue that's with the world being in a recession or very close to an economic recession. So what would the price, let's just assume for a moment that they're at their peak capacity, or they literally can't produce anymore, which I think is a very solid argument based on the fact that they're not even producing their quotas. And let's just say that let's just fast forward 3 or 4 years to where the demand gets back on track because we go from an economic recession to true global economic growth again. What would that do to the price of oil? I mean, you're talking $200 a barrel. Easy. And I think that's what the market is kind of trying to sift through. That's what the market is trying to get their head around right now is, okay, do we want to sell oil because demand will most likely plummet if we get a big recession, which the bond market is predicting, or do we want to buy oil because we know in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, long term, based on what we're seeing OPEC do right now, that there's no way they have the capacity to meet global demand.
Mhm.
This is kind of, I think, what the market is trying to figure out right now.
Yeah. So, what can we do to stop OPEC's massive cartel on the entire global oil supply? With the imposition of multi-layer price floor, the U.S. could support domestic crude prices at, let's say, $65 per barrel. That's high enough to encourage existing fracking efforts while also encouraging additional production. Yet it's low enough to help pull the rug out from under a former ally that it has shown its alliance to Moscow. We do this all for the manner of commodity producers, by the way.
Yeah, so this is mostly nonsense. And the reason it's nonsense is obviously he's talking about Saudi Arabia and the oil frackers. I don't even know if they'd make money at 65 a barrel. But let's say they do. Oh, here we go. Great. So cost of producing barrel of oil and gas. You see, let's see, U.S. shale. Well, that
Is that
surprises
like
me.
this is at like 23, it looks like?
Yeah, but that's 2016.
Yeah, I couldn't find a real-time chart anywhere
It's going
in
to be a
the
lot higher than that now. But let's just say it's $35 a barrel. Okay. Josh, go ahead and point out where Saudi Arabia is
at the
there.
very bottom. like
Oh, at
like
$8 a barrel. Oh,
yeah.
right. So somehow, if we bring the floor down to 65, that's going to benefit because we bring shale oil into the mix, but that's somehow going to be better than, or Saudi Arabia is somehow going to get the rug pulled out from under them when they're producing at $8 a barrel. I don't get that. I don't understand that at all. I would argue that if you're going to bring the price down or manipulate the price in any way, down or up, that's going to benefit or hurt the lowest cost producer. It's either going to benefit them the most or it's going to hurt them the least.
Yeah, that was pretty much the
Oh, no.
article.
Let's go back up there. Because then in the next paragraph, he's stating that we should bring the price of oil down. So in this, he's saying that we should put a floor, the first paragraph, saying we should put a floor on oil. And the next paragraph, he's saying that we should produce a lot more oil to bring down the price. So then there's less money going to the bottom line of Saudi Arabia and Russia, who are obviously, we're at odds with right now. But again, he's contradicting himself quite dramatically there. And see, a flood of U.S. oil could drive prices back into the 20s, even as U.S. companies are guaranteed. But wouldn't that benefit Saudi Arabia and Russia? Because sure, their revenues would go down, but you would crush their competition. You'd completely wipe out their competition, where they would be the only oil producers standing. And then, if you think OPEC's powerful now, how powerful would it be if the only two oil producers on the planet Earth were Russia and Saudi Arabia, which is what would happen if oil was $20 a barrel for a long period of time.
Hmm.
Again, it's just not real deep thinking. And I think it's just a result of probably the way this works is you've got a guy that's in CNBC or a gal that's like the editor or something like that, but they're the ones that are choosing what stories they need to do. And it probably just like Ron's at his desk and the boss comes by and says, Ron, bam, I need you to do a story on this before lunch. And Ron probably looks up at him and says, whoa, what do you mean? It's only 30 minutes before my lunch break. He's like, I don't care. Do the story now or you're fired, or something like that, right? And so he just has to scramble and just throw together a story really quick in a half hour. To give him the benefit of the doubt, I think that's probably what's going on here. But that's just another reason that you should maybe just briefly look at CNBC for kind of the highlights of what's going on in the world. But if you really want to understand what's happening in markets to a point where you could use that information to make investment decisions, then you got to follow the pros. And those pros, in my opinion, are on podcasts, alternative media, and on financial Twitter. All right, brother. We got anything else?
Nope, that's it.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us on the news today. Let us know in the comments and in the live stream what you thought of the format. And if you guys like it, we'll continue to do it maybe a couple, 2-3 times a week, and then turn them into clips. So if you guys want just specific topics based on what we discussed, you don't have to watch the whole hour live stream. But let us know what you think. In the interim, guys, enjoy your weekend coming up. Always make sure that you're standing up for freedom, liberty, free market capitalism, and we'll see you on the next video.
Thank you.